It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. My hometown commander, ready for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew a version 1.0 deck list of the command right in front of us. My quest out brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back for here today. The deck list for the deck in question today is going to be down in the description below. So I'd really appreciate it if you get interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe. Consider checking out those links down in the description. The Discord is live. Mike and I are in there chatting. Come hang out with us, as well as I've got my first official Millsy Brews merch up there. I'd appreciate it if you could check it out. But today, we're taking another look at Magus Lucea Kane, our Teamer Tyranid Commander. Released all the way back in those 40k precons. She says, beginning of combat on your turn, you get to put a counter on a creature you control. Or just any creature, not a creature you control. And then the main ability, and the thing we care about, is she can tap that double colorless. When you cast your next spell with an X in its mana cost or activate an ability with an X in its activation cost, you can copy that spell or ability and choose new targets for the copy. This is really great because there's a lot of great creatures, spells, and abilities that all have X's in their cost that we're going to look to double, and we're going to try to make sure that those things can come in and hit hard when they do come in. We're going to talk kind of a lot of ways to take advantage of playing X spells, things like Hydras and the Tyranids from the deck that come in with lots of counters on them. It's big X spells that we can take advantage of copying, and all the same, and work towards getting in for damage. But all right, what are the X spells in question? Well, to me, there's really two types. You have the more traditional Hydras, and then you have the Tyranids, right? So you have things like the Brutal, they're X3 and green, comes in with X counters on it, and has the Ravenous ability. So if it comes in with 5 or more, you actually draw a card when it enters. This is really great with Magus because if you create a copy of it as well, both of them will actually draw you a card when it comes in. And then it says when it enters the battlefield, you get to distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of other target creatures you control. This is a great way to spread some other counters around, especially for our abilities that care about having counters on creatures. Genesis Hydra and Hydroid Krasis are both just great Hydra value engines for X. Hydroid Krasis says that when you cast the spell, you gain half of X life and draw half of X cards, where you round down each time. So you won't get to do that on the copy, you'll just get to do that on the original. But hey, you have 2 flying tramplers with that many counters on them coming in. And then Genesis Hydra is a way for us to dig for our support pieces. It says when you cast the spell, you reveal the top X cards of your library. You can put a non-land permanent with mana value X or less from among them on the battlefield, and shuffle the rest into your library. This is really important to hit our key support enchantments and artifacts, right? And make sure we can get them on the battlefield alongside our big creatures, as well as just getting a nice bigger, 1 or 2 big Hydras as well. Ingenious Prodigy is kind of an interesting one. It has Skulk, so it can only be blocked by creatures. Can't be blocked by creatures with bigger power. Comes in with X counters on it. During our upkeep, if it has a counter on it, one of our counters on it, we can remove a counter to draw a card. It gets some extra card draw. I think that's the one thing our deck needs to do to continue having staying power is draw through cards so that we can really keep hitting our opponents. But I think the Tyranids do a really good job at that because most of them have that Ravenous ability, like Moloch. This Moloch comes in and fights up to 1 target creature our opponent controls. And if that creature would die, you exile it instead. It's really nice to have Moloch get copied, come in, and then be able to fight twice, right? Both it and its copy get to fight, take out some pesky creatures, and exile them. Mistcutter Hydra can't be countered. Haste protection from blue, and it gets a bunch of counters on it when it comes in. I like it because of the not only can it not be countered, but it's protection from blue. It's not always going to matter, but I think sometimes it matters, especially in some matchups. But the truth is, Mistcutter Hydra can just be a really powerful, hasty threat as soon as it comes down, especially since we have other ways to give things trample. Repaging Yao from Fallout's a card I've always thought about for this deck, and I put it in my personal version of this deck as soon as it released in Fallout. It comes in with X counters on it, but when it enters the battlefield, you destroy any number of target artifacts and enchantments with mana value X or less. So we get to do this twice, right, because of Yao getting copied. And this could be really nice to knock out those pesky mana rocks, or take out a big value enchantment that's really important. And then it comes in with Vigilance and Trample, so it's a good body on its own. Shivan Devastator, one of the Hydras that works really well in the deck because it has haste, but it also has flying. So you get to have 2 of them come in with flying and haste. Could be big attackers to have your opponents have to deal with. And the fact that they have, I think, haste, other than the fact that we have other cards in the deck that give them haste, is a huge deal for the purposes of turning our mana into damage that turn. Stonecoil Serpent, range trample and protection from multicolored is a very important ability, especially since there's a lot of single target removal spells in Commander that are into being 2-colored, or other things. And then when it enters the battlefield, you get the counters on it. But I like the reach and trample. I think that's really important. Reach to help deal with those big flyers, and then trample to already be a threat on its own, even though we're going to add more of that with other spells. Turbogon and Tyrant Guard, again, another one of these ravenous creatures. Turbogon says whenever it deals damage to a player, you get to make that many 1/1 Tyranid creature tokens, so you get to go wide. And the Tyrant Guard has a great ability. It can sacrifice itself to give all creatures we control with counters on them hexproof and indestructible. So that classic kind of heroic intervention effect just right on Tyrant Guard. And since you can hopefully get it down with a copy, that means you have two of them, right, to really protect your board. Always love Voracious Hydra. It can come in and either double the number of counters on it or fight. Really like that means that you can have both of them come in and fight. Just take out your opponent's pesky creatures while you're getting your big guys down on the board. And then Zoanthrope's a really fun one. It comes in and deals X to any target. So that's a pretty big deal as well. Because then you can hit a player, you can hit a creature, that hit a planeswalker. There's a lot of things you can do with it, and it's already flying in Ward 2, so it's a nice threat once it comes down. But I think Magus would be remiss if you didn't start dealing with spells as well, because there's some great spells. Things like Awaken the Woods can make you a bunch of Forest Dryad land creature tokens to really ramp you, right? And get access to more mana. You've got more bombastic things like Crackle with Power to deal a ton of damage to each of your opponents. Magus says you can change the targets, but if you put even just 3 damage into each of the X's for 11, right? You're getting 2 copies of it, dealing 15 damage to 3 targets. You pick your opponents, copies, that's 30 damage off just 11 mana. And you could start to see where, that can get even better the more mana you put into it. Jai's Immolating Inferno deals X damage each up to 3 targets. Again, pick all your opponents, put as much as you can into X and get it doubled. Comet Storm, very similar. You have to multi-kick it to pick multiple targets, so you'll have to pay a couple extra mana for that. But choosing a target for each time it was kicked deals X damage to each of them. So you could hit creatures or you could hit players. There's a lot of ways to take advantage of that. A card that I really thought about until late was a card like Astral Cornucopia. This is a triple X artifact. Comes in with X charge counters on it, and you can tap it for a color of any amount of a color equal to the number of charge counters on it. We're not playing much Proliferate, but what I think is good about Astral Cornucopia is even just 1 copy, right? So think about it. If it's just for 3 mana, right? You're getting 2 copies of it, right? If you put 1 into X, Magus is copying it, and you're getting 2 mana. Each of them tapping for 1, and that's a great rate, right? That's better than most 3 color mana or 3 mana Ranaroks, right? If you go into 4, now you're getting 2 of them to tap for 2, right? So you could start to see the great returns for your mana with Magus out, and that's not even to talk about the fact that if we can untap Magus, because there's ways in the deck to untap Magus and tap her again to basically stack her ability. Things like Kiora and Kiora's Follower can untap a target permanent. We're playing things like Freed from the Real and Instill Energy and Pemenzora that can untap her for just a single blue mana on both Pemenzora and Freed from the Real. And Instill Energy, we can do it free, but just once per turn. And there's a way to start getting 2, 3 copies of a spell, and it's going to get out of control depending on what you choose to do it for. I think that's where the part of Magus really shines. But I think the other way that it really shines is just getting straight up more copies. I think Twinning Staff was always the classic way to do it, right? If you copy a spell 1 more times, you copy it that many times +1. But actually, Duskmourn added a huge piece for us in Marvin Murderous Mimic. It says it has all activated abilities of creatures you control don't have the same name as this creature. Well, remember that Magus's whole ability is an activated ability, and that rider of copying the spell is a part of that resolution of the activated ability, meaning that we basically then have a second Magus to do all these abilities with, add more mana, and get more value on. And then the classic Unbound Flourishing, where you cast a permanent that contains a mana spell of X, double the X. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery that has an X in its activation, copy, you choose to target for the copy. It's just literally best of both worlds. If it's a permanent, it gets bigger. If it's a spell, you get another copy. We love it, and you want to see Unbound Flourishing as much as you can. Well, let's get into the counters matter. Counters always matter, especially in decks where you can get them. And here's the combo that has gone on to be a part of other decks, but I feel like really got to shine the first time here with the Red Terror and All Will Be One. The Red Terror says whenever a red source we control deals damage to 1 or more players or permanents or players, you put a counter on the Red Terror. And All Will Be One says whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, you can do that much damage to target opponent, creature opponent controls, or planeswalker opponent controls. What these two will do is Put a counter on anything. All be one will ping for one. Red Terror will see it, putting a counter on itself. It'll ping for one again with the all be one, and you can have that loop go through as long as it's not interrupted to just nuke your opponents out of the game. The other, of course, big piece is Vorinclex, right? Double the amount of counters we put on our stuff, half the number of counters our opponents put on their stuff, and just a big body on its own. We want to see it as many times as we can, not only to make our counters better, but shut down our opponent's counters. If you've never played a counter deck into a Vorinclex, you'll never understand how good its ability is when you start realizing that all of your counters are halved, especially if you're only putting one counter at a time. It actually gets rounded down to 0, meaning that no counters get put on at all, and it could just really shut down some strategies while just doubling our own. But playing things like Wave Goodbye to bounce all creatures that don't have counters in them back to our hands, Ripples in Potential and Mutational Advantage can be protection for our creatures with counters on them, allowing them to phase out for the purposes of Ripples of Potential and Hexproof and Indestructible and prevent all damage to them for Mutational Advantage. Remember that Magus puts a counter on a creature every turn, meaning that even if I'm only playing Hydras that come with counters, I could still put counters on Magus to potentially, protect her as well. Innkeeper's Talent, right, could be leveled up to get all our permanents Ward 1 and then get that doubling season ability and that Vorinclex ability to double the number of counters that are going on our things. Simic Ascendancy, our classic counters win con. Whenever one or more counters are put on a creature we control, we put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy, and at the start of our upkeep, if we have 20 more growth counters on it, we win the game. Just gives you another option. In case people are really dealing with your board, you want another way to potentially try to get around it and win, you have that. And then a card I love for damage in Uncivil Unrest. So it gives all non-token creatures we control Riot, so they get to come in with their choice of a counter or haste. But it says if a counter, if a creature you control with a counter on it would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. And that can lead to some big things, especially when we start talking about getting in for damage and getting stompy. We have things like the old One Eye, which is just going to give everything trample. That's pretty great, because then with counters, right, that means big creatures are going to get trampled in. But there's a lot of other ways to look at it. Things like Herald of Secret Streams can make them unblockable. Winged Hive Tyrant says that all of their creatures that have counters on them have flying and haste, potentially beginning evasive, right? Our opponents then have to deal with that. Garruk's Uprising giving everything trample, and when a big creature comes in, we get to draw a card, right? Adding more card draw. Same thing with Temur Ascendancy, giving all of our creatures haste and getting more card draw when these big Hydras come in, making sure that we're filling up our hand. Invigorating Hot Spring has counters, and we're allowed to remove a counter from them, put a counter on something else, but all creatures with counters on them have haste, meaning those big creatures that are coming in right on that turn are going to be able to turn in for damage and get in. Even though I have played Magus in the past, and this is a more updated version of it, and that, we had access to some new cards, I still believe that no deck's ever complete. There's a lot we can learn in testing, and I think for the purposes of this deck, I had to cut a couple cards just for their cost. Mainly the Ozolith as a $40 card. I'll be honest, I've noticed a lot when I've played Magus that the Ozolith is a nice when you have it, but not a needed card. So I like, for example, my personal brewer, I've taken it out. But the two Hydras I really wanted to add in that I didn't just because of their cost tags were Goldvein Hydra and Benevolent Hydra. Goldvein comes in with haste and trample, a beautiful ability for its $20 price tag. Nice hasty attacker, and then when it dies, you get a bunch of treasures equal to its power. Again, I love Goldvein Hydra, but it was tough to want it because I wanted to include things like Vorinclex and some of these other things, and something had to go, right? Benevolent Hydra, another great one, gives you that hardened skills ability. Whenever you put one or more counters on another creature, that many +1. And so I like that ability, right, to start adding more counters. And I feel like both of these are great Hydras if you have extra budget. I think this is the first place I would start over something like, the Ozolith for its great ability to move counters from itself onto other things. I think I'd rather focus on getting in harder with things like these hasty Hydras rather than not. But I'll let you take that your interpretation, right, when you do your own testing. But let's get into playtest number 1. Keeping a 1/2 lander with Arcane Signet, freed from the real there for the Magus. Stonecoil Serpent, the Hot Springs, and a Core of the Calling. Core of the Calling may look odd because it is a creature tutor, and we have a lot of Hydras that have X's. But the important thing is we do have a couple creatures that don't, meaning that we can go get things like Vorinclex or Herald of the Secret Streams or the Red Terror. There's a lot of actually creatures we can get with that Core of the Calling. But turn 1, let's get a land in. We want to work our way up to 4. Right, to get ourselves up to Magus. We'll get this Arcane Signet down here, turn 2. Again, we don't mind taking a turn or two off because we're trying to work towards Magus, right? Here on turn 3, I guess there's an argument for invigorating Hot Spring, but to potentially have Magus have haste. But I'd kind of rather just get Magus down and get the counter on her with her ability since there's no other creatures down. So that way, next turn, we can start pushing towards casting an Expel. I don't think we'll be able to because we only have 4 plus Magus would be 6. So I guess we could double up on Stonecoil Serpent, but that's not going to get us too much. If I freed from the reel, I could go 2 and 4 and get, what, 3 copies of Stonecoil Serpent at 4? Right, I guess that's an option. Brutal will be 3, so I wouldn't get the draw. Like, you ideally want to get that draw, right? So, what, it's either 2 at 6 or 3 at 4 for Stonecoil Serpent. Which do I think makes the most sense? Well, if I do 3 at 4, I could get something like Bread for the Hunt down next turn and get some draw. Let's do that. Tap for 2 colorless, untap it with the Freed from the Reel, tap for 2 more colorless, and like I said, let's go for 3 Stonecoil Serpent, 1 copy for each of the taps of 4. So we got basically 3 4/4s, right? And now next turn I'm thinking about maybe something like Bread for the Hunt to start drawing some cards, because now we're kind of missing out on some mana, right? 4 mana here. We've got 2 from the Magus. Now we can tap, untap, so that'd be 4, 5, 6, 7. I think if there's any good doppelgang we could do this turn. Like, we could doppelgang for 1 and make like 3 copies of a land if we wanted to. But that, I don't know if that seems ideal. We kind of want that second mana, right, for the purposes of the that. So I kind of think I'll just Bread for the Hunt and get in swinging with these Stonecoil Serpents. I have a tough time believing on turn 5 that we couldn't get all 3 of them to hit. The goal here is to hit the land, and we did. It'll actually come in untapped. So I think I would just tap Magus for that to just go ahead and cultivate. Zoomer, you don't have to use it on an Expel. I think I would just do that and cultivate, just to, again, iron out some of our colors, set us up for next turn. And the Stonecoil Serpents, right, are going to be threats as well, right? So we're good in that aspect. Here we're at turn 6 with 7 mana. Love the idea of trying to getting into like something like the Broodlord to get some draw. We could. This would mean Magus twice. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We could go 3, 2 into Doppelgang. Make 6 copies of a land. You know, just basically just like, right, just ramp ourselves out, right? So we never need to not have more mana. We do have something like Treasure Vault, which can just make a bunch of treasures, but I don't know that I really want to do that. Almost makes me wonder if it would be best to wait a turn for that Doppelgang to just get more value, right? So if I do Magus twice, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5 into Broodlord would be 9. My thought here is Broodlord to take some draw, right? And then I guess we run the risk of pitching hand size, right? So what if we Hot Spring for 3? I could put 4 into Quarter Calling. Green, green, green. But then there's that. If that's 4 into Quarter Calling, that could go get Herald of Secret Streams. That could go get. Just trying to think of what for 4 it could go get that would be really beneficial. Let's take a look, just for the purposes of this playtest, since this is what this is all about, is learning. What for 4 could we go get out of our deck that would be really useful? Nexus is good, being able to turn all of our basic lands into being able to tap for double colorless, right, to really increase our X spells. That's an option. Biophagus is a mana dork that can have all creatures that it spends mana on to tap to come in. Selvala, right, big for mana, right, we're eventually going to have big creatures. That's an option. I'm just trying to think of what's our best. Ooh, Winged Half-Shepherd's 5. That would have probably been ideal, but this is good in these playtests to know what can I go get. Well, Marvin, clearly, right? There we go. Second copy of Magus. That makes a ton of sense. And then go get something like Tyrant Guard to protect the board. I realized that I missed Magus's trigger last turn, so we'll just put it on her. I think my gut tells me Selvala, but I think Herald of the Seeker Streams is also just a good idea. The reason I think Herald of the Seeker Streams is a good idea this turn is because then it makes all of the it makes all of the stone coils unblockable, right? And then we can hit in this turn. So I'll put a counter on Marvin and start combat, hit in, just to get some draws, right? Hot Springs came in with 4 counters on it. I guess we'll just make it 3 and we'll put a counter on Herald main 2. And then I guess we'll just... Ooh, Beanstalk is great. I guess we'll just pitch something like the Prodigy. I think we're good on card draw now. It's just getting other things down. So now going into turn 7, 8, 10 with the so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13 mana total. So we could do a pretty big, could be a big thing here, right? The nice part about that Hot Springs, right, is with the, so let's say I put, so I said 13. So let's say I put 9 into Broodlord, right? So it's going to come down with 9 counters. I get 1, 2, 3 copies, right? That all come in with 9 counters, right? That's the nice part about, tapping Magus twice and tapping that Marvin is that you get that benefit, right? I Ravenous 4 times. I draw 4 times, which is okay. We're just going to end up pitching, pitching a couple things. Now all of these can attack, right? Bred for the Hunt is a May. I don't have to draw, so I wouldn't have to drop it. You just put 48 power worth of creatures on the board with haste and unblockable because of the Herald. And you've still got these, right? You've still got this 12 power worth of creatures. So you get 60 power worth of creatures that can't be blocked to just start wreaking havoc. And next turn we can just keep the process going. So, not a bad first playtest. We'll get into the second one. A little Magical Christmas Landy in that sense, but it's still good to see what can we do if we're a little bit more inhibited with our resources. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with that Twinning Staff, Broodlord, Uncivil Unrest, and Open the Way. Open the Way is a X spell that says you could search for up to X land cards until you hit X land card, where X is that can't be greater than the number of creatures in the game, and put them on tap. So if we get 3 into it, we can basically get 6 lands, right? Which is a great way to ramp ourselves in the process. I think we'll just kind of work our way up, actually. Right, Root on Crag since Rockfall Veil is going to come in, or would it come in tap? So here, if I would say we're for sure going to be able to get Selvala down because we have the double green, right? Ideally, we want the blue. There it is. So I'm trying to think of, is there any way for us to, use Selvala after? But I guess Magus's power is less than hers, so we'll just come in. Because Magus will put a counter on herself at combat. And now we're just working towards having more mana, right? So 4, we can put 1 into, so I'll get 2, 5, 6, so 2, 5, 7 right now. So we don't want to do the Broodlord just yet, right? Because of its the draw. But I'm thinking, do we take a turn to set up? Maybe something like Unblown Flourishing and Kiora, right? Kiora can untap, Magus on a future turn. Just again, set up for a big, Broodlord next turn, or we have enough mana to put 5 into Open the Way to get the top 6 lands off our deck and just really set up, right? I think that makes the most sense. So we reveal until we hit 3 for the first one. 1, 3. The rest go in the bottom. Right, my thought here is this just ramps us, right? I mean, getting 6 lands is going to be brutal, and then we'll do the copy. We missed a couple of our big Hydras there, but I think it's fine because we're untapping next turn with 10 mana, right? Now here, right, with 10 mana, we could Broodlord, but I think want to think about, Kiora being able to untap Magus, so that's 4 mana for 3. Then I'm thinking, what am I flourishing? So I've got 4 mana up, 6, 8 from Magus. If we put 1 into Selvala, it'd be 9. So that's perfect enough for Broodlord. It's going to get copied twice, right? Because of Magus. Now, because I'm Bone Flourishing, that X is actually going to get doubled, so these are going to come in as 10/10s. And we have the fun problem of us now drawing 6, 3 from the Broodlords and 3 from Kiora. Moved to end step, I think we could pitch the Mountain, we could pitch the Arcane Signet, we could pitch Kiora's Follower. I think we're flooding right on our lands now. They can't attack this turn, but that's A-okay. Each of them still has their ability to distribute X counters among other creatures. Actually, just realized we would have got an extra draw off of Selvala. We'll just, I guess, put 10 on Selvala. Put 10 on Magus plus the 1 from hers. I guess we'll just go like... Maybe we'll say we distribute some of the other ones around. The point there is we drew 7 off just playing 1 Broodlord. I mean, we had to pitch a ton to turn. I like the Instill Energy. We'll keep that. We'll pitch the Termagant Horde Swarm. Here you go. Can't attack this turn, but that's okay. Magus put the counter on herself. Now Savala's tapping for a ton. I mean, if we untap with Kiora, I mean, we probably can just play a ton of stuff. I mean, all we're looking for now is a haste outlet, right? Anything to give the creatures that come in haste, which we do have an Uncivil Unrest, right? Unfortunately, just the non-token ones, but still, like, the point is next turn here, we draw, put the Instill Energy on Magus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Selvala can give us what? Up to 19. Magus give us 4 extra, so we got the better part of 23. You play the Uncivil Unrest, play the Beanstalk to draw. I mean, you pick your choice of these, play these 2, right? The regular ones can come in with haste because of Uncivil Unrest, and then whatever else is still here is just going to hit hard, right? I think that's one of those scenarios where that opened the way that really just, right, pun intended, to open the game up for us to do what we wanted to do. But playtest number 3, 3-laner with Cultivate for some ramp. Or the Wild Selvala Ravener. Ravener's kind of interesting to force a creature to attack, but I think really it's just another, Ravenous trigger for us. We'll get the Rupal Crag just in tap first, since that's not a forest or mountain in our hand. I don't think we've got anything good. We want to turn on 2/2, so we'll wait till turn 3. Turn 3, we'll just go ahead and Cultivate. Get the green source. I've got double blue in my hand, and I've got double green in my hand, so I think the other one needs to be an island, just for that Penman's Aura, that way when we get there. So here on turn 4, right, we've got Magus. Kind of right, set up for next turn, we could do something like Awaken the Woods to really ramp us forward. Selvala can come down to start getting us some good access to mana. So here on turn 5, we tap it as now. We would have Termagant Swarm for 7, or X is equal to, actually, sorry, 6, where we could get a couple cards drawn that way. But I kind of like the idea of just using the turn to set up, just to really make sure we have it for next turn. So 3 for... 3 for Selvala. If I do that, I've only got blue mana left. I guess get the Penman's Aura down. Is there a better route to go about this? Is it Bread plus Rhythm of the Wild? Or is the answer just Awaken the Woods? 2 into the 3, 5 into the X. We're getting 10 Dryads. Yeah, I guess that's probably the better choice. 10 more mana next turn, right? I mean, I think that just makes more sense. Max will just put another counter on herself. These are lands and creatures, so the nice part is if people are using things like Cyclonic Rift, right, they won't bounce back. But now coming into this turn, 5 lands. 10 Dryads that can tap for greens. We're just swimming with green. Here we'd have a Doppelgang play, 12, 10, 15, 17. We could put 5 into the Doppelgang X, just make a bunch of copies of our lands, right? We'd actually make 10, we'd pick 5 targets, make 5 copies of each of them, which means we would actually get 10 copies of each of them, which we would, I guess, just pick all of our lands and never have another mana problem for the rest of the game. I think that's probably a fair, if someone doesn't counter both of them, you're basically just netting 25 lands, right? And I mean, it ain't gonna take very long to figure out a way to just nuke the mana, right? We could actually, let me think about this. If I Penance Aura on Magus first, oh, I don't have a 3rd blue for the Doppelgang. Yeah, so I can't do that. I would just have to just go 17 into it. But I think that just goes to show you the good of a card like Doppelgang where it can touch anything. And I mean, you could see the fun with that. We could even take the turn off to put a couple more permanents in before we put the Doppelgang. But I think the Doppelgang makes the most sense there, and I have a tough time believing that any table would want to walk through you taking 25 lands or 50 of them. If you, right, because 5 copies of 5 permanents, right, 25. If you get 50 copies of your lands, I don't see a world where anybody would really like keep playing that one out, right? Especially when you can then just start getting infinite mana with Magus and Penance, keep making all the creatures. It would be just brutal. But let me know, what do you think of Magus down in the comment section below. This is one I wanted to re-update for myself and just see if I could find some more fun ways to make the deck a little bit better. And I think I'd have. So I'd love to see what you think in the comment section below.